Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Today's gonna be a fun lecture. Today we're gonna be covering how the heck do you use color modes and do your black and white painting and then bring it to color. Yeah. Okay, but before we start, I need to inform everybody that we are live. Boom, 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 boom. Man, I have no idea why today is such a hard day in terms of waking up and doing stuff. My body is slowly catching up with the exhaustion of the mind. But it's okay. Final push, everybody. Okay, let's go. Just making announcements. How's everybody doing, by the way? Let me see. Hey, everybody. Hey, Ring. Hey, Felipe. Hey, Antonina. Augustine. Greetings, Vikings. All right, I need to do a post onto Instagram first, while the Vikings are assembling. Right. Okay, I did it. Well, not really. Still in progress, but... Alright. Hey, Nicola. Hey, Max. Marco. Right, what are we spamming today? Let's do Witness Me. Witness me! From Mad Max. Witness me! Chrome teeth. That's us, guys. That's us. That's us doing our final, final hurrah. We only have 2 weeks left. And we're doing it. You're doing it. I'm doing it. We're all doing it. Right. Okay, come say hi. We are live. Sorry for people who are listening in recording. Just staying silent. We're about to start. All right, come say hi. We are live. Okay, cool. Doom, doom, doom. Then put away the phone. All right. If anyone wants to, repost, support, do all that stuff, please do. Helps a lot. All right. Shall we? Hey, yo, and I suppose that our spam? Yep. Witness me. It's from Mad Max. It's just everyone is by their computer just yelling. Peach juice. Very good. Okay. Shall we? All right, let's go. Welcome everybody to lecture number 25. Woo. Today, we're going to be talking about layer modes, black and white process, a little bit more in depth. And I'm going to show a few tips and tricks of how to organize your frame. And yeah, hopefully today is going to be fun for you guys. And let's dive in right away. So today we'll be covering this frame right here. Actually, it's so funny. Actually looked like this in the beginning of the session, but then I looked at my I looked at my speed paint and I really liked how the greens popped up in the door. So yeah, I even re-uploaded this to ArtStation, so it has the new doors in it. Yeah, so it's totally normal to retouch your paintings even when they are done. But today I'm gonna show you how I basically turned this thing from this to this, and then we're gonna talk about in depth about layer modes and what you should use, what should you not use, what our layers are absolutely useful. But let's dive in right into the speed paint, because the speed paint is pretty long and I want us to have all the time in the world to cover it. So yeah, as you can see in the beginning, it's a regular sketch. You all know that my sketches are pretty rough when I start. It's because I don't want to spend too much time on, on cleaning everything up. And especially with those little sketches that are not very detailed, the main driver of the painting was color. So my overall process for this is I had a plane and the main characters on separate layers, and I had the background on the separate layers for line work. I turned everything to kind of like grayish thing, and then just like in our painting with the Vikings that I showed you guys, I just start lassoing in the main shapes. Here I actually started with the lighting, where the line is going to be coming from. So I did the door, and now I'm doing little holes between the doors, because the entire thing is like a hanger that is constructed out of wood and everything else. So I'm starting with negative shapes right away, because all I have to do then is just paint some greens or blues behind the or into the shape that I just lassoed in, and it'll be really, really easy. And as you can see, every time when you're starting any painting, you just start very big, and then you try to work yourself into little details, and then you're trying to simplify every object and every plane and then every main character into as simple of shapes as possible. So right now I'm working on a layer underneath the light layer here, and I just made a gradient because I knew it's going to be a secluded, or the light's not going to be everywhere. There's going to be a bunch of bounce light, and I haven't made my decisions on final lighting yet. Yeah, and then we just skip through just a little bit. I just start lassoing in my main shapes. The windows are going to be a little bit lighter. The base of the airplane is going to be a little bit darker, just so everything is readable. Another thing that you have to understand when you're doing your black and white painting, and probably here I went to the bathroom in the speed paint, but when you are making your black and white painting, make sure that every single thing in the silhouette is readable, and then within the silhouette you have clear value differences. That, let's say, the propeller read okay, and then the main thing over here also read okay, but I added, let's say, a gray circle over here just to emphasize this shape. And now, as you can see, I am pushing and pulling my line work, making sure it's not so contrasty, and then just blocking in the local color of the little dwarf, just doing it really, really fast. I am not thinking about color or anything right now. All I'm thinking is, are my shapes clear? Are my silhouettes clear? Because first of all, for example, with the goose, why I made it a little bit lighter? Well, because the local color of the goose is, well, the goose is light. The goose is white himself, right? And the local color of the skin of the gnome is also lighter, so that means I'm taking a lighter value, even though if the gnome is going to be in the shadow, it's still going to be not as dark as, for example, the plane that was supposed to be black in the beginning, but then I actually made him, I think, yellow or orange, I don't remember. As you can see here, I added the main lighting from over here, and still everything is pretty black and white. Lassoing in the main, I think this is a motorcycle. And the only thing that I'm really paying attention to is that my foreground, middle ground, foreground are clear. And over here, I think somewhere here, yeah, I just lassoed in the lighting just with, again, the lasso tool. Where is it? Come on, Misha, you can do it. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, and as you can see, the painting is slowly coming together because the values work in terms of contrast. Let's say the duck, or I'm not sure, is it a duck or is it a goose? I call him duck, but it looks like a goose. But the goose itself is popping up from the gray door behind. You can still see him. And then the gnome itself, we have a dark background behind his light head, and then we have a light background behind his dark body. And then this way everything is readable. And see, I made this specific shape of lighting to make sure that his silhouette is, again, is very, very readable, and you can see where he's coming from. I think I'm adding just hair here a little bit. Yep, I'm adding hair onto the gnome. And then slowly but surely I'm doing it. I'm adding some lighting on top of them. Yeah, I think from the last session, or from the last lecture, you basically understand the whole process. Here I'm having a lighting on a separate layer on top of everything, and then I have my super clear values underneath that I can just magic wand. And if you don't know what I'm talking right now, rewatch the previous lecture before this one, lecture number 24. You'll understand everything a little bit more in depth. And yeah, here I'm just adding a little bit of variety into the values, so there's a little bit of texture. One thing that you have to understand is the process of finding the right shapes. Like for example, I had like some kind of engine over here, and then over here I made a motorcycle. Over the time I'm gonna change it. And now let's look to the fun part. So now it is time to actually color our painting. And the way I do it, you're gonna see right now, is for the most part through overlay layers. I usually take out, not lasso tool, but I select my background, and as usual, I do context first. So this one is a little bit different because last time what we did, we merged everything and then we used that. But sometimes when the painting is not too complex, I keep everything on separate layers anyways, and I don't need to do the previous technique with merging everything and then copy pasting everything back into clip mask. Here I just took an overlay layer and then looked how it looked. I knew that my barn is going to be brownish. There's going to be a lot of bounce light that's going to be coming onto the wall. So what I did is actually not only with overlay. I think I tried overlay and then I set the color mode to color. Color is a very nice overall layer to color any of your black and white stuff. It maintains the value for the most part, but it doesn't always work very well. It doesn't, because the thing is, sometimes when you put it doesn't do with saturation very well. Sometimes overlay doesn't do with saturation very well. So when you are trying to paint anything, just make sure you try color and then overlay at the same time and see how it looks. My main objective here was just to make sure that I have the context in what the line is going to be. I'm not sure why I'm making it blue right now, but I am selecting my my light layer, or the silhouette, or the mask of the light layer, and then I'm just putting an overlay on top of it just to change the color of it. Also over here you can see I made some blue come through. It's because the sky is also shining through. As you can see here, I selected the plane, and I think that I had the propeller on a different layer. And right now I'm just I'm just experimenting with sliders. Sadly, OBS for some reason didn't capture my sliders, but here where the mouse is adjusting nothing. It's me adjusting sliders, so the RGB sliders, and then playing with hue. And then I also knew that the lighting that is underneath the plane is going to be bouncing from the floor and then getting on the belly of the airplane. So what I'm doing right now is I am in overlay mode, and then I'm painting onto the main character. I'm painting the reds and then the greens onto him, just to see how it looks, right? And see, I'm always going back and forth for my color wheel, and then adjusting and then making sure that, is it too saturated? And the overlay makes it too saturated. I'm like, okay, let's make less saturated of a color, so overlay does its job pretty well. So for the most part, when I am painting anything black and white, I always use overlay layer because it is very, very good. And then the lighting itself, as you can see, the yellow lighting here, it's also an overlay layer set to yellow. And then we're gonna go a little bit more in depth later on how I usually do lighting on characters with an overlay layer. For the most part here, as you can see, I have the foreground and I have the layer mode set to color. Again, I think I picked some kind of a yellowish green color because the cloth needed to be old, and then I wanted to be a little bit like antique and ancient in terms of wear and tear. Yeah, and as you can see, like the painting itself right now, it's work in progress. So make sure that when you're starting with color, like for example on the left, as you can see, the little paintings, I have my reference always really close to me, so I can always just glance to the left and get some kind of crucial visual information or a color idea or a local color idea. As you can see, I only have 5 of them, but those are 5 perfect references. And I already told you what a perfect reference is. Perfect reference is the reference that does not raise more questions, or doesn't raise more questions than it answers. So for the most part, your reference needs to answer a specific question, which is either what the local colors are, what the environment is, or what the design is, etc, etc, etc. For this part, as you can see, I'm adding the local color of the boards because before that it was just pure white. So I'm selecting my light layer and then looking at how it looks. And see, the main thing that you have to understand, everything is push and pull and a lot of experimentation. I like to think of our brain as a Gordon Ramsay that always says, oh yeah, this tastes good, or this is crap, and then it throws it away. So you're always trying to show your brain different solutions, and then your brain's like, or yeah. As you can see here, I'm starting to add a little bit of bounce light because it was a little bit too cold for me, and then I wanted the environment to be a little bit friendly. And then I also did it with an overlay layer set to like 25% opacity. When you're working with your layers in general, what you have to understand is that there's no set in stone pipeline for every painting, unless you're painting one thing over and over again. Let's say a Hearthstone card. For the most part, for Hearthstone cards or anything that is produced in masses, you can figure out a pipeline that will work with layer modes across every painting. But for the most part, what you have to understand is when you are painting, what you need to do is know what you're trying to accomplish, which is, well, I'm trying to shift the hue of the entire building towards browns, and that's what you're doing. And if the layer mode doesn't do that to you, you try different layer modes, and if it doesn't succeed, you just paint it by hand. I really don't like people who rely too much on layer modes all the time. So you have to treat layer modes as really fast and convenient way of block things in, and then you merge everything, and then you paint everything by hand. And I really like this approach because if you are able to paint everything by hand, let's say you jump to heavy paint, it's an awesome thing, by the way, or traditional, you can do anything you need. Another thing is heavy paint is really good for practicing without layer modes, actually. I'm not sure if anyone heard of it, but it's free on PC and it's free on iPad and on your phone. I think Android too, if I'm not mistaken. Heavy paint looks, I'll show you. Actually, it looks pretty cool. I'm gonna open it. This is how heavy paint looks. You cannot have anything but your RGB sliders. There's no color wheel, even though you can enable it, but you have to mix the colors with green, red, and blue. And then I like to work on this program without layers, even though you can have layers. So another thing, like if you want to test your skills, can you paint without layer modes or everything else? Download heavy paint. It's super awesome. You're gonna level up your color game, and then also efficiency in painting. Yeah. So going back to the speed paint itself, as you can see, my main objective is first figure out my composition, and then things in perspective, and then just fill in everything with black and white to make sure the silhouettes work and everything else works. And then I'm just slowly adding, again, hue shifts or local colors through layer modes, through overlay, color, and no multiply. For the most part, overlay and multiply. And as you can see here later on, right now, the characters are not hit by lighting whatsoever. I'm just continuing to experiment now, but now with color. I was thinking, like, what if the plane was covered by a big cloth that they just, took away? How would that look? Because the thing is, what I wanted subsurface scattering onto the cloth, so the door shines through it. But then at the end of the day, I looked at it and it was not good. As you can see here, I'm like, okay, what am I doing? I'm painting all the wrong things. So I went back to my focal point. I did some, as you can see here, some details and some tools under the plane really fast. The whole painting took me around 4 hours. And then I started blocking in, my fill light from the top. As you can see here, the gnome has a little bit of a blue onto him, and then the duck has a little bit of a blue onto him. And here, as you can see, sometimes when none of the layers work, just to put the character into the the environment, what I will do is I'll just have a regular mode on, and then I'll just, on very low opacity, take the local color of my context. So in this regard, the context is kind of like brownish orange because it's warm, and then I would just do a layer on top of just my characters and set it to 10% opacity so they fit in a little bit more. And if I'm losing any local color in the process, I can always paint it in manually by hand. And just to skip it a little bit further, I will be doing a lot of experimentation in terms of lighting here. How the duck is gonna look under the lighting. I think at the end of the day, I just deleted it. Yeah, and then as you can see here, I have a big multiply layer on top of everything, because I thought, what if I just put more things in the darkness, then everything is just gonna be lit by a bounce light. Also here, I'm just experimenting with depth. See, it's really nice to have everything on different layers, because then you can do this and then adjust little things here and there. Also, what I did is I stylized the plane a little bit. The wings are now a little bit shorter, just because it was creating a very weird tangent when there's just this huge parallel thing was going across everything. And here I'm just experimenting with with the position of the duck. But as you can see now, the way I treat black and white, and then when I block everything in, it's just a starting point. And then when you have your main temperatures blocked in and everything else, then you can actually start and start painting on top of everything. Don't don't overcomplicate things if it's not needed. I know some people have such a refined pipeline that every time it's the same thing, but for me, my pipeline is, you know, blocking things as soon as possible and then jump into color as soon as possible, and then use the black and white thing just as an underpainting, just as a way to start and have a solid base where all the values work, and then you can bring it to the next level. I really like how bounce light under the plane here looked. So now what I'm doing is, as you can see here, it's set to overlay. You probably can't see it, but I can. All I'm doing is right now is painting in red into the shadow of the gnome. And as you can see, overlay does an excellent job of, I would say, maintaining his local color 100%. But overlay, I think it's the best, one of the best layers to lay in lighting or bounce light. It just looks super organic, doesn't make anything muddy, doesn't oversaturate. Of course, sometimes it does, but for the most part, if you have your local colors picked in midtones very, very well, it does the job very, very well. Yeah, and then adding a little bit more of a bounce light here and here. And as you can see here, why am I doing everything so saturated in red? Because it's my highlight color, or it's my accent color. So I'm trying to keep the viewer's eye over here. And now after, as you can see, the black and white stage lasted for about, I wouldn't say half of the painting, but for, let's say, when we were in black and white completely. I think we were in black and white around, you know, 70% of a painting. I don't know, this is what, 80% or 20% of a painting, like 15%, something like that. And then we jumped in right into color. And then we blocked in all the local colors around, you know, 3/4 of the painting. Right? No. Like, I say 35%. So yeah, black and white, it wasn't, for 10% it was black and white. For 35%, at 35% mark, we blocked in all the local colors. And then at around 45 or 50%, we started figuring out in-depth lighting and in-depth composition. As you can see here, our main protagonist is pretty well lit. We know where the lighting is coming from, and now we are. I really was dissatisfied with my foreground element, so I thought, like, why not make like a bike or a motorcycle? And right now I'm just trying to figure out the silhouette, but it's really, really important to keep in mind the values of the foreground, and then making sure that the detail is not distracting. Because, for example, the main reason why I changed the foreground of motorcycle, it was, I think over here you can see it, it was like on the side, because it read like nothing and didn't really provide anything. And then the motor, I didn't know how it looked really bad. So at the end of the day, if it's not helping your painting, it's distracting from your painting. And I'm glad I did replace it. Another thing is, please keep in mind the lighting scenario of the entire thing. So for example, I'm gonna go out into my regular painting program. When I'm looking at this painting, and let's just copy paste it and then put it in here. When I'm looking at this painting, I knew when I was painting it, just from looking at my reference, that first, what did I have? I have a box, right? So I have a box with lighting coming into the box from the side. So I knew that I had yellow light over here, right? And I knew that I also gonna have, well, a lot of bounce light in that box, right? And then at the same time, I also knew that I had a blue sky above this thing. And I remember, we are treating the blue sky as a lighting thing, right? And I knew that it will go through cracks here, and here. So, and that's why, for example, as you can see here, the hues of the duck go a little bit towards blues here and there. There's a little bit of bounce light here, as you can see on this engine. It's all from the sky. Same thing here of I know it's not 100% realistic, but for the most part, that's why, for example, here there's a hue of blue. Here, the local color of that purple. As you can see here, I'm blocking in those things from the sky. So that's why when you are in your reference phase and you can see all your reference to the left, and then you have a reference to the right, I'm like, okay, well, I want God rays like this maybe, but then this is going to be the outside. So when you're in black and white, yes, you are only caring about your values in your main contrast, but at the same time, what you need to slowly visualize in your brain, it's what surrounds all of this. What's the main context of the lighting, even when you're doing a black and white thing. As you can see here, when I was 90% done with my value sketch or value blocking, I guess, I slowly started thinking out loud what the colors are gonna be, and that's me setting in the context, right, and then slowly building things up, imagining that box that I just showed you guys, right? It's not always that I knew that this is going to be my lighting scenario, right? But over time, when I started blocking everything in, I understood that that's what it's going to be. All right, and then, you clean up the composition, and then you start working on nuances. So you're making sure that all the occlusions are there, or the shadows are there. By the way, this is an impossible lighting scenario. There's supposed to be a door shadow over here. I'm not sure if I add it in. Let's see if I do. I don't think I do. But the thing is, when I added that shadow in there, it just looked weird and bad. So I'm just lying through my teeth here, because there's a window here also that's supposed to be in there. But I'm pretty sure none of you actually noticed that, because for the most part, 95% of the information here is correct. And when it is correct, usually sometimes people don't question you. As long as everything is kind of there. And also around 3 hours and 22 minutes in, what I did is I just merged everything together as usual, but I kept my layered my layered file underneath everything also as usual. And then I'm just, I'm pushing and pulling. As you can see, I added a bunch of new layers, but as you can see here, I'm like, okay, more of a blue fill light on the top, a little bit more volumetric. As you can see here, I added with a texture brush, then added a few spider webs here and there. Because spider webs, what they did for this painting is they added cool guidelines, and then I added a little bit of movement to the duck, that the feathers are coming off him, because he kind of says to the gnome, hey, look what I can do, I'm just like this airplane, type of deal. Yeah, and then spider webs for guidelines. Then I merge everything again, add a little bit of chickens here, a little bit of reflections of the surrounding in the motorcycle thing, and then I do a little bit of cross hatching for texturing, and I do my regular thing when I just do a bunch of cross hatching and then overlay it on top of everything with an overlay or a multiply. I do same with lighting, but there's one thing that I did here that was really bad, is I basically blew up or overexposed the door, and I really don't like how that looks. So what I did at the end of it, when I was preparing for today's lectures, I was like, I brought the local colors of the trees back, and I really like it now. Yeah, for the most part, you're probably very confused because you still don't know how to use layer modes, right? Oh, by the way, thank you for the Viking chant in the chat. Yeah, I need your jujus, guys. But for example, there's a few main things that I use. So for example, when I'm purely working with black and white, so for example, let's say I have a head of somebody, and then I have their body, right? And then I have let's just make that gnome, right? And then we have their there. Or you know what? Let's make a Viking. You know, let's make a Viking. So the horns is probably gonna be something like this value, and then maybe let's do pretty dark hair, maybe. This is gonna be me. So and now we have a little spinkadoodle, right? So and now what we can do is we can go different ways. So some people will use this under sketch, and remember we did it in the previous thing. They will just lasso tool the value, you know, because they're so clear. And then what they will do is they will just paint in the, you know, the local color of the guy. And then they will do that with each object, technically. So for example, then we have his, you know, his thing here, then maybe the belt is gonna be a darker version of this, right? And then we did all of this through what? And then this thing's probably stay gray, and then this thing's probably gonna be maybe, you know, something like this. We did it just, you know, by just color picking and knowing what we needed to paint in. So this is not really layer modes. So this is one of the processes how we can do it. It's pretty simple. I use it all the time too. So this is process number 1. Process number 2 would be, you know, doing everything with an overlay layer. So with an overlay layer, what you do is you do an overlay layer, and then you, let's say his local color of the skin is going to be orange, and then you are, you know, and then you're trying to get an orange in, and it does a pretty good job, as you can see here, right? You just paint it on top, and it's pretty awesome. I can do the same thing with green, and as you can see, overlay maintains the value pretty well. Well, for example, when I did everything by, you know, when I did everything by my own eye, I messed it up a little bit here and there. But here, for example, we cannot go towards oranges because it's, you know, it's so dark. Like I would probably have to go super saturated. Let's see if it's gonna give it justice. Yeah, plus minus. So yeah, this is purely overlay. So if let's say I put it into my normal layer mode, it looks something like this. But then what I do is I put it into overlay mode, and it maintains the local colors pretty well. There's another way. So this, let's call this way overlay, and then let's call this just, you know, regular block in. Then there's another version of all of this, and this one is quite interesting. It's through a multiply layer, actually. So, but the thing is, your base has to be pretty bright in terms of local colors. And then what you can do is, then you set it to multiply, but the base has to be pretty, you know, as I said, the base needs to be pretty, what do you call it? Pretty light. But with multiply, it doesn't work as well. So for example, here we're trying to go towards oranges. It doesn't really, well, it does let us do it. So see, as you can see, we can do it through a multiply. Here it's going to be gray. Here it's going to be this. And then here it's going to be this. And as you can see, I couldn't get the same blue. Let's see it. Like, I can try it like this. So yeah, this is coloring through a multiply layer, and then when we are, you know, put it to normal, this is how the multiplier looks like. Yeah, without the multiply in it. So if I put it to multiply, it looks like this. So when is it useful to use multiply to color? Well, nowhere. I always use the overlay layer. So this is overlay. Let's just put it here, or the regular block-in way. So this is the regular block-in. It's like when we do everything with just selecting our black and white and then adding color on top of it. But an overlay, it's super simple to do with an overlay. But multiply, I'm gonna show you a special technique later on, like Samuel Smith uses it or Klaus production uses it. And when they were coloring the light with multiply layer, I'm gonna show how it works. So, and this is multiply. You know what, let's make sure that those guys are, not just floating in space and it's actually looking good. So let's just do this for those guys. Yeah, so let's say, for example, I just blocked in that, and let's say I want to add lighting on top of everything. So I would create an overlay layer for each light bulb. So for example, here's one light bulb. Let's call it orange light. Orange light, and then let's do a blue light too. And then also set it to overlay. So I want my lighting to be from right to left, and then I'm gonna pick a light. So now all I have to do is, to paint the lighting in is I just need to, turn the light bulb on. So for example, if it's from the right to the left, it's gonna be something like this, right? And it maintains the local colors. It might do it over the top a little bit, but another thing that you can see, the only thing that I needed to do is to color pick a yellow color, and then it calculates all the local colors for me technically. So I can see here, his hair is becoming oranger, and then here the green goes towards, so here this is a pretty cold blue, so now it's going towards more warm greens, right? And then same thing with blue. So for example, if I just wanted to give him some blue light from the right, as you can see here, the overlay fails a little bit. It cannot calculate what the brown is going to look like, so I'm just going to leave it alone, and all I have to do is just painting it by hand. But it does the same thing on the right side to him. So this is just painting with like, if I wanted to do like, a fill light, it does it pretty well, right? If I wanted to have, let's say this is more of a blue fill light on the left, right? And then I wanted to do some, very intense red bounce light. All I have to do is just, just paint it in, and it's gonna look pretty good. As you can see, if you have a really nice value range or pretty nice blocking of your local colors, if then you're gonna use an overlay layer on top, it's just amazing, honestly. It works very, very well. It doesn't work very well sometimes on dark objects like this, so all I have to do is just color pick it and then find the local color by hand. Let's say when the blue is hitting him over here, I'll just have to, paint it in manually like this, because overlay couldn't calculate it. But for the most part, it's pretty well, right? And that's me doing this is bounce. So for example, see, and then what I can do is I can technically manipulate. So this is my orange and yellow light bulbs. I can technically just turn them on and see, well, actually I paint everything on one, and see how it looks. But usually when I'm painting anything, right, or I am using overlay modes for figuring out my lighting, like if my local colors are good, I can actually, like, put him under just, one big yellow or I mean orange light like this, and then, you know, you don't have to calculate anything. But that's the thing, I can know, because I can do everything by hand, when my overlay layer is not working properly. Okay, I know when my overlay layer is not functioning properly is because I can paint everything with reference and out of my head, and I know how real lighting interacts with stuff, right? So for example, here I can 100% tell that it's a little bit too it's a little bit too bright. So I can use overlay layer for actually also painting in the shadows if I need to make it more dramatic. For the most part, I would usually use I would use multiply, but sometimes overlay is also good. Sometimes I would just use one layer without anything. So for example, here, me painting in the dark spots just with a regular layer set to like 69% opacity. So yeah, overlay layer power, because first of all, if we need to, you know, change the context, make it, you know, into an environment, it does a pretty good job. When we need to add lighting, it does also pretty well job. All right. So overlay for the win to maintain local colors. It's super awesome. Let's look at let's look at this variation, for example, on the right. Ooh, spooky. So for example, here's the variation on the right. This one is pretty simple. This one we blocked in ourselves. So sometimes if you need to make things darker, or for example, let's say if I need this guy to be in the foreground in the shadow, for example, right? Make it a little bit darker, maybe something like this. And then the character is super in the foreground, I'll use multiply. And then actually the cool thing about this, that with multiply, actually you can use the same multiply layer and then paint in the lighting in the multiply itself if you need to. So for example, here's me using multiply to give a character in the shadow a light from the left. And then if I would have used overlay, it would have done also a pretty good job, but then I would have had to go again for brightness. So for example, overlay still did a pretty good job, but if I wanted to make the lighting brighter, because the thing is, the cool thing about overlay is this, it never, you know, it doesn't mess with value that much. So it will maintain everything, maybe slightly make it a little bit lighter, but for the most part, it just maintains local color and values everything pretty well. But for example here, so this is how, right, this is like, I need to have multiply overlay layers on top of everything. Or I can just paint the lighting into the multiply layer. So for example, if I need to paint in some, you know, blue, you know, fill light into this guy, I can just paint all of this into one multiply layer like this, and it's gonna be just fine, right? It's just gonna be just fine. And then, you know, if I don't like my lighting, all I have to do is just, you know, turn off my multiply layer that I painted everything in. So multiply layer is really good for putting shadows in and then darkening things, but you can also paint in the lighting into the multiply layer if your base local colors on the brighter side. So basically, if you block in your character with the local colors as they are hit by the light, see? So this kind of looks, in terms of brightness, that it's lit by a fire, for example, in a dark environment. And then I'm putting multiply layer on top. I can make it darker, but then because I have light colors underneath, I have value range to add lighting into the multiply layer over here, right? And then we have overlay that we can also use on top of a multiply, and that's how I usually do it. And if I need to add extra juice, I just add more and more and more overlays. And then what I do is I just merge everything together just like this, and then I just paint regularly by hand. And this one, yeah, this one is also multiply. But see, that's the thing. It doesn't really matter if you color everything. If you color your local colors with an overlay, and then you add lighting with an overlay. Or if you find your local colors just by finding them, and then lassoing the main shapes, and then finding it by your own eye, and then color picking. And then, yeah, but again, the regular pipeline is you find the local color of your character from black and white either by blocking it yourself or finding it by putting an overlay on top of it, or by putting a multiply on top of it. It doesn't matter how you find it. And then you add lighting through overlay. And then if you need to add shadows, you use multiply. And in very, confined scenarios or very unique scenarios, you would just use multiply. If, let's say, all the characters are in the shadow, you can use multiply to add all of that in. But at some point in my pipeline, I always merge everything. So at the end of it all, let's just make this guy's lighting kind of like, see, I'm putting everything to multiply, and then here I just want to have some kind of like a, disco lighting. He's gonna be half purple, and there's gonna be like, highlights of him. And now the reason why I did this Disco Ball Viking is we're getting to a new layer mode. It's not called color dodge. It's not called that. You know what? Let's get some fill light into here because he kind of looks a little bit too lonely, I think. Yeah. So for example, this color mode that I just showed you guys is called Shade and Shine. This is a paint tool size specific layer, and I'm gonna show you an alternative. For you to have the same layer as I do, for it to function the same, you need to use a layer called what's it called? 1 second, I don't need to remember. I forgot what it's called. Linear light. I think it's called linear light. So for you to make the same layer mode as mine, so for example, here's how Shade and Shine works in Paint Tool SAI. So for example, if I have, let's say, a little fire in here, Shade and Shine is just really great at just making things glow. Because it doesn't overdo it, and it's just, as you can see, very, very natural and awesome. And let's say, for example, if I want to make, I don't know, his eyes glow over here, for example. Of course, I need to have an underpainting, but something like this, and it's gonna be like, kind of laser-like or something. Anyways, it's a pretty good layer mode that what it does, it brings all of the values underneath. No, it's not Paint Tool SAI add. What it does, it brings bright values underneath and then basically makes them brighter and then saturates them. And it works pretty, really well. And for you to have the same layer, you need to go, again, it's linear light. You need to double click on that layer or that layer mode, and then go into settings, into blending options, and then click off. Use layer transparency and determine the shape of interior and effects. I think, what is it called? Layer, let's say. Yeah, so transparency shapes layers, you turn it off. Yep, and then you're gonna have the same awesome thing that I have here with shade and shine. Honestly, color dodge, I rarely use it. I hate color dodge. And just like if you want to compare color dodge, so this is shade and shine, and this is, I think I don't have color dodge, but I think it's called burn and dodge. It's the same thing. So here's what color dodge does. I don't know what it is. It's not good lighting. It's just weird. It's good at bringing saturation in, but I really don't recommend using burn and dodge. Shade and shine, yeah, that's my stuff. So for example, if you need any harsh lighting or anything like that, sometimes I would just, sometimes I would just do entire lighting path with linear, what's it called? Linear light, I think. Yeah, with linear light, it's pretty cool and awesome. So for example, if I need to do some rim lights, I can just go in and then have shade and shine layer. It just it just brings in saturation very well. And if you need to have a really bright light source, it's pretty nice. Yeah, so that's honestly all you need. So to recap, right? When you have a block-in with your values that will look something like this, you have different options. And those options are, you either do it through a multiply, and usually multiply makes everything darker, right? You can do it through an overlay. An overlay does its job pretty well. Or you can do it just by hand, by just going in and then, doing it just without any transparency. But what you have to understand is, when you are using any of those methods, all you're doing is you need to block in local colors. When you're doing it by, so manually with selections, right? Selections. And I'm gonna explain again how do I take a magic wand and then I click on the value, and then I just paint it in, and that's what it's called manually, right? Or, all right, we use overlay. Overlay maintains value, and it's really good. Or we can do it through a multiply, but I don't recommend it. Multiply is usually good for shadows, but I wanted to show you that it's a possibility. But what's in common for all of those layers? Let's say all of those. What they do is they basically filter through whatever is underneath them and change it to something else. Overlay. So let's say, for example, if I would give you an ideal pipeline, it's black and white into overlay overlay for local colors, so local colors, and then into multiply for shadows, into either overlay, or for harsh light, I would say linear light. So yeah, to repeat this, what I just told you, I'm just gonna give you another little demo. So this is the demo. So overlay for local colors, we'll just take this guy because we already have his local colors blocked in. right? So twink. So overlay for local colors. It looks something like this. So you can have a little cheat sheet, you know, and you can understand what it's doing. So you have black and white, and then you color everything with an overlay layer, right? And then with a multiply layer, what you're doing is you are adding, you can add occlusion if you want to. So for example, if I have a multiply on top of everything, and I set it up to like purplish, so it doesn't, again, when you are doing multiply layers, let's say I did with blue, it looks weird. I need to always see what's going to maintain the local color underneath. Sometimes I can do occlusion underneath with actually overlay, because overlay maintains local color a lot. But the thing is, overlay is not really good at changing values to go darker. So that's why, sorry, I would use most of the times multiply, and everyone uses multiply for shadows and occlusion, right? So for example, this is an occlusion pass, and then sometimes on top, let's say I'll do a shadow pass. Let's say this guy is in a full shadow or in a half shadow even, something like this, right? And then if I need to have light on top of everything, so shadow plus occlusion. And then when I want to do a light pass on top of everything, all I have to do is do what? Take this, and first of all, move this up a little bit, right? So all I have to do is take this guy, and then either take linear light, and then I can do, you know, I can technically, like, you know, put him by the fireplace. Then linear light will do a pretty good job on top of everything, right? Or I can do an overlay on top, and then let's say do a nice, this is overlay, yep. Let's say I can do a nice, you know, rim light on top of everything with an overlay layer, right? Or I can just paint everything manually. Let's say if not everything is pretty good in terms of local colors, all I can do is I can go in and then start painting stuff in. But again, see, we're jumping to color really, really fast, and then black and white stuff. Well, you can use multiply layers just like this with black and white. But the thing is, when, let's say, if you're gonna do form in black and white, and then you're gonna do like values in black and white, you can still go in and then use all those layers to color them in if you want to. But the thing is, you'll have less control. So that's why I don't do this when I'm painting. Let's say if I wanted to, I can technically save those layers, and then all I need to do is like, all I need to do is change the color of the shadows on the multiply, and then with an overlay, bring back the local colors of the guy. I can do all of that, but you know, for the most part, when I am painting, and again, this is my process, this is good for color script and everything else. I know people who do a complete painting from start to finish in black and white, and then use, again, overlay, multiply, color dodge to paint it. But the thing is, it's always the same thing. When you are painting a complete painting with values, with form, with texture in black and white, you're basically painting it twice. First in black and white, and then in color. So then when I am doing anything that is black and white, like just I showed you here, I use a black and white thing for just to block in the main information, the main shapes, and see what the main contrasts are. And then I go in and I use overlay, multiply, and then linear light to add shadows, occlusion, local colors, and light, and then bounce light into it. Yeah, so for the most part, I use them as a blocking tool. So overlay and multiply, it's a nice blocking tool. And then I just merge everything, and I just, whatever I can, I paint by hand. Whatever I need to speed up my process on, I paint by using overlay and multiply. This is very good process, what I showed you right now, for color scripters. Because imagine you are blocking in your context, and then you have a bunch of characters with local colors, and then you can really, without no effort, test out an entire lighting scheme on everybody just by having, you know, a multiply occlusion and shadow pass on them, and then linear light or overlay lighting on top. Because honestly, I don't usually use overlay 100% all the time to block in local colors, because I don't need the correction of an overlay to tell me what the local color of the skin is going to be, because I know it by observing, and I know it in my visual library. So very rarely I use this step. I almost always, as in this, I remember example, just block in everything by hand and then use multiply and overlay later on. But for the most part, I use overlay a lot of the times just to see how a lighting will look like really fast, and then see like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, or no, and then I delete it and then I paint everything by hand. Again, if you want to be, you know, a layer mode junkie, you can 100% do it if you want to. Where's the overlay mode? And this is not the overlay. I had two multiplies in that. Okay, punk. Overlay. Chunk, 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 chunk. Why are you not? Oh, here you go. Yeah. So if you want to be a multiply or an overlay junkie, you can 100% do it if you want to, but I really recommend not to, right? And by the way, this is my example of, for example, here's multiply. Oh, this is normal, so I'm gonna color pick this orange, and then I'm gonna do it like this, and this is gonna be an overlay. So you can see multiply always darkens things, and then overlay brightens them up a little bit, but for the most part maintains the local colors. And then when you block in everything by hand, well, you are screwed. Not screwed, but you have to basically figure out what the local color of the face is gonna be, right? Yeah, so hopefully this was useful. Yeah, what do you guys have any questions? Did your, you know, do you understand how you might use all of this in your pipeline? Man, it's so I love color. You know, this is my favorite demo so far, because that's what I do at 24/7. Yeah, and the thing is, if you are wondering what other layers do, I don't know. Very rarely when I use them, like screen, it's good for overlaying textures. And that's it. And then everything else, like I don't use it very rarely. Like if let's say if I want to have, let's say, cracks texture, let's say. So if I want to overlay anything on top, all I need to do technically is, where is it? Overlay everything on top, and then I just put everything into overlay. Sometimes screen, very rarely, and then I can just, you know, do the contrast to an extreme, but for the most part I just use overlay. And overlay is pretty good. If I, let's say, if I want to have, you know, this guy to have cracks on top of him. There's also another layer called darken and lighten, but I don't use them. Like, for example, if I need to darken anything and shift everything to like blues, I can just, you know, I can have a dark layer on top of everything set to 58% opacity, right? If I just do darken like this, well, it doesn't really change much. Say normal. I don't know. I don't use darken. I use lighten a lot sometimes. Let's say if I need to, you know, if I need to put everything into, let's say, an atmosphere. Let's say this guy was huge, let's say, and I wanted to make him fit into, let's say, a giant, you know, skybox that is like right here, and he needed to be into perspective, right? And there's a bunch of, like, you know, houses in front of him. I would just use lighten to put things into atmospheric perspective. Other layers like hard light, soft light, hard mix, I never use it. Exclude, subtract, no. And then another thing is color. Oh yeah, I forgot about color layer, by the way. One of the most important ones. But another thing that you can use to color things is the layer called color. And that's exactly what it does. It's just goes, so if we have, say, red or green here, and we set it to color, it just changes the color of the underlying values, and that's it. Honestly, I don't use color that much. I use overlay for the most part. Just overlay is this OP layer that just makes everything look great, honestly. So the only practical use that I have for color layer is yeah. So for example, here I'm gonna set color to the color black, and now what it does, it just takes everything to black and white, and then I use it to double check my values. You can technically use the you know, the layer color to block in your local colors on top of your black and white sketch, but I don't ever do it. And I usually recommend things that, you know, I don't usually do. I think just overlay is really good, and then, you know, blocking in your own local colors yourself is, you know, really good. Yeah. So any questions, guys? my little personal cheerleader gang. Thanks, guys. You have no idea how much it means to me. Plus, I need to pee really badly, and it really helps me to stay in my seat and finish the lecture. Yeah, it's time for questions. You guys can stop because I can see there were some questions, and I think I missed some of the questions because there was so much spam. All right. Let's see. Trying heavy paint now. Tough. Yeah. If you merge all the layers, can you use the modes to change the day to night, for example? Yeah, you can. But you have to, like, for example, let's say, so if we merge everything on these layers, for example, right? And let's say if I want to maintain the lighting onto the guy or make it darker, all I have to do is just, you know, put a multiply layer on top of him. And then, but let's say if you need to make your lighting, man, I really like those little Vikings. But for example, if you need to make your lighting like a night scene, it's nice if you can just maintain, if you have a version of your file where you have everything blocked in like this, with just local colors, because it's gonna, like, for example, Tanko House paints a lot of the things in diffused lighting, because diffused lighting is the best lighting, and then it's mid-tones that you can change to anything you want. We're gonna sneeze. Sorry. Yeah. I use darken to pull strobe reflections off oil paintings at work. Ah, okay, cool. Are you kind of like a traditional painter? What do you call it? Traditional painting rebuilder, or not old so much anymore guy? My brain slowly is collapsing. Right. Based on my drawing, muddy colors come from blending the colors together, losing the values that make them noticeable, where you can't tell the light, shadow, local colors apart. Yeah. That's why you really need to figure out what your local colors are and stuff like that. Yeah. So, do you always paint the shadows first and then the light? What if you would like to change colors of your shadows? It would change the light as well or not? Well, that's why I that's why I like, for example, let's look at this guy. Right? So the main reason that I am painting the shadows first is, let's say if I have, let's say I multiply, and then let's say the shadows were over here of this dude, and you know, sometimes what I do, I just do the shadows with, you know, some kind of a very dark color just to see where they're gonna be, and then I change it to something brighter like this, so the local colors is not as changed, right? So if I like how my thing here looks, I will not paint it in. But for example, let's say this guy is in the shadow, then we're gonna start painting in the color on top with, let's say with a linear light, for example, right? Something like this. The cool thing, like for example, the reason why I did this thing is what we can do is we can actually add lighting underneath the multiply layer, and let's say add it over here. And what it's gonna do is, let's say if I have it on top, it's too much, right? It's too much under. It's called subsurface scattering, right? But for example, if I do a lighting underneath, let's say my occlusion and then my shadows, and then in the areas that I don't have shadows, I just don't paint shadows with a multiply layer. The cool thing about it, if you use overlay or multiply, what it does, it creates automatic subsurface scattering and automatic color vibrancy just by mixing together. But again, your local colors need to be to the spot, and then you need to understand how everything looks good together. But that's one of the yeah, it's just really good. Does Sai have a color proofing view like CMD-Y in Photoshop and set the proof setup to S gray? No, I don't know if it does that. Like for example, you know, Paint Tool Sai is a very old program. It's very simple. I don't think like you can even export every layer as an individual thing. But the reason why I like it is just, well, first of all, it's really, really fast. Like for example, this brush right now is 5,000 pixels, and that's what I'm doing with it right now, right? Like it's insanely fast. I can technically pull it. No, I cannot do more. But this is me painting with a textured 5,000 pixels brush. And this is another thing, like, and that's why I like Paint Tool Sai. And I don't use that much, but the mixing of the colors are really, really good naturally. Like they're very, very good. Like if you mix red in this, you'll get purple. So for example, if you're a traditional artist, you like gouache or oil, it's pretty cool and awesome. So that's why I use that program a lot. But for the most part, I really like Shade and Shine layer, this one, that I always use for my lighting, little things here and there. Yeah, so I really recommend Paint Tool Sai if you are, you know, if you're painting a lot of things by hand and you're not using a lot of features like curves or anything else. That's another thing. This program doesn't have curves. It only has like RGB sliders here and there. Yeah. So it is a really good program. It does lack a lot of things, but I think the thing is, it takes. I'm sure if I can show you this, but it takes very little. whatchamacallit, resources in terms of everything. Like right now, there's a lot of things that I haven't saved, so that's why there's like almost a gig of things in a task manager. But it's really fast. Like I couldn't run Photoshop on my other low-end Syntixon computers, and if you have a low-end computer and you're a beginner, Photoshop is hell for you because it's so slow, and then the brush catches up to you like after 5 miles, right? And then with Paint Tool Sai, it's you don't need so much RAM to run it, even though it runs out of it sometimes, but it's pretty fast. Like if it runs out of RAM, all you have to do is resave your file, but nothing lags. You just need to make your file smaller. But with Photoshop, yeah, you might operate okay with your RAM, maybe not lag out, but the thing is everything is lagging. So yeah, I really recommend Paint Tool Sai to people. If you didn't notice, I really like it. Yeah, any more questions? If no, that's it for tonight. You know, so whatever I used with those Vikings guys, right? You can do the same thing with anything. It doesn't have to be a Viking. You can have it a room. So this room was black and white. I turned it into this through overlays and multiplies and then everything else. So the same kind of pipeline that I showed you with those Vikings can be applied to anything. You know, an airplane, a room, a cow. It's the same principle. Yeah, multiply overlay for local colors, or do it by hand. Multiply for shadows and occlusions, and then overlay or linear light, or do it by hand to do lighting. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of in-betweens, like you can replace overlay with multiply, but I don't recommend doing it. Just, you know, follow this pipeline. So yeah, hopefully you now can implement that into your own pipeline, and then, you know, when you're gonna be starting new keyframes or you are still coloring your keyframes, you can just test this out. Just understand there's one thing that you need to always keep in mind is that, well, your local colors need to be really in a kind of neutral zone right here somewhere, not too dark, not too bright. So then you can go brighter or you can go darker with the multiply layers. That's why you need to have midtones, a lot of midtones in your local colors when you're blocking in the scene, because then you're going to be changing the values of all of it with the adjustment layers or color layers, I guess. Yeah, those are called adjustments layers, by the way. It's nice that I remember at the end of the lecture. Yeah. When making shadows and occlusions, do you use different multiply layers to stack shadows on shadows? Sometimes yes. Sometimes yes. Yeah. It's uncomparable. Yeah, Paint Tool Sai is only on PC and computer, and then Procreate is on iPad. I personally dislike Procreate because it doesn't have shortcut keys. Like, as you can see, I'm crazy about flipping, zooming in, zooming out, Control Z, my sliders, my layers, when I need to merge them, create a new one, blah, blah, blah. It's, you know, it's uncomparable. Procreate is very, like, you know, Nicholas Cole works in Procreate. A lot of people work in Procreate. It's a pretty powerful program. It doesn't really matter. It's just, you know, whatever's your cup of tea. I would never say that it's a bad program. It's pretty good. I use it for sketching. All right, but, you know, iPad is a pretty expensive sketchbook where you can just buy one sketchbook for $5. Yeah, you can work with shortcuts in Procreate, but, you know, I don't know. It's just weird. My friend, like the guy who does Artwad, Antonio, works on iPad a lot. I don't know. For me, it's just not fast enough. I need to do a lot of mistakes really fast when I'm doing color boards, and then just Procreate. It's very particular. You just need to have like a solid plan in mind and go for it. It's not really good for my purposes. It's really good for illustration, anything that like super slow and methodical. But for color keys, I just need to go, and I need to have my shortcuts. Like my wife says that when I game and play Dota 2 or any shooter, my keyboard makes no sounds. But then when I'm actually painting, my keyboard is like I'm playing Street Fighter. It's like so that's why yeah. Yeah. Okay, any more? Yeah, okay, no more questions. Okay, so yeah. Use this to your advantage. One thing that I want to say is congratulations. This is almost our last lecture on theory or anything painting related. So we're pretty close to an end, guys. We're pretty close. So congratulations, you survived a few more days. Hopefully you and I will both gonna do it. Yeah, and for people who listen to this into recording, too bad you missed all this fun stuff. Maybe we'll do the same camp next year, who knows. Yeah. So yeah, you're the best Vikings I ever knew. Stay hydrated, scroll, and everybody join the Q&A sessions afterwards in the main channel and in the main Discord channel. And for people who are listening to it, we have a pretty awesome and wholesome community on Discord. We support each other there. Link is in the description. Go check it out. Yeah, it's never too late to become a Viking. Yeah, you're the best, guys. See you in Discord on the Q&A session. Kachabao!